antibiotics when you are treating with low this interlocking layer. So hybrid system it is useful in pediatric fracture where the ring fixator and protein EOS etc. both combination. Then externally, see we want to remove the external fixator, the conventionally what one should wait at least 3 weeks if you are removing after 3 weeks. See, before 3 weeks means remove and interlocking edge, and after 3 weeks means you have to wait for 3 weeks, and ESR and healing, contract healing should be there before putting the nail. So, orthopedic surgeon and non-microvascular flaps. So, what are the flaps you can do? See, this is the recommendation. Primary closure, we have to attempt primary closure. If not, recovery. So, you may need to recruit more skilled incision. The wound is small, where you can do the pie casting and can close. So, the fourth option is negative pressure therapy, where wound size will be decreased. Then, is the gastrocnemius flap, upper 1/3. This is the option, and it can be even free flap. With the pedicle also can. Then take the incision, say the midpoint between the posterior border of the lateral malleus and Achilles tendon, and the upper point will be the junction between the two heads of the gastrocnemius. So this is the pivot point is there. This is where you can rotate, like the 5 centimeters proximal to the lateral malleus. So this is the one example position flap. So then free flaps are we have used 26. So where almost 16 flaps, latissimus dorsi flaps are used. Rectus abdominis also harvested in one situation, parascapular. And out of 70 cases, 37 flaps we have used. Means if more than 50 situations we have used the flaps. So the result is 90% of fractures managed by external fixator and 10% by the secondary procedure like interlocking nail or Eligero. So our cases at NIMS. So this is the armamentarium routine, and this is the regular configuration, triangular frame. And this is the fracture where they have opened the abdomen and harvested the rectus abdominis free flap and covered on the same sitting. This is the primary lateral arm free flap. This is also they have done the same sitting. See, this is one example. See, any wound who can cover with the skin graft on same sitting. This is we have managed this national kabaddi player with this simple skin graft. And this is the one case where Eligero metal has caused the reaction and managed with the functional cast brace. See, and this is one case where we have done the vascular repair. And this is the case where we have done the free fibrillar graft, means pedicle. And this is one should allow the weight bearing, partial weight bearing, touch ground gate. This is the way one should allow the partial weight bearing with external fixator. This is one case where this is child where the RTA met with an RTA where they are run over by a lorry. So it has so much crust. So we have debrided and we have done the primary skin cover. This is almost and we have external fixator. This has caused the stiffness, ankle stiffness that subsequently treated by the Eligero. So the recent experiences like this is the wound 3B. So this also can you close. See, provided the patient is presented in one day. Within 1 day, you can close. See, this is the way we have closed and healed with only simple marginal skin necrosis. So only criteria is 12 hours and 24 hours. 12 hours in the high velocity injury, we can close. And low velocity wounds can be closed in 24 hours. See, this is one patient where they presented with tibia, the open tibia fracture with a wound over the patellar tendon. So with the patient came with the LTPT. So this is the presentation. So we have done debridement and partially we have closed the wound. And I have added only simple steam and pin, one more up UTPT and connected. So this is so cheap and quick and versatile external fixator. So with one steam and pin, we have constructed the external fixator and managed. So take home message, don't delay the debridement and soft tissue cover, otherwise it can cause the self-goal. In worst situation where cover is delayed, you can consider the VAC. After debridement, any procedure can be considered clean and you can do the definitive procedure like interlocking nail. So consider non-microvascular flaps wherever possible. And fiction flap for 3BC where extensive soft tissue injury, where we can consider the free flaps. And don't forget that build up and build down option with the external fixator. You can increase the strength, you can decrease the strength of the configuration, and the exchange nail option also there. So conclusion, efficient wound management by orthopedic surgeon can reduce the need of plastic intervention. Thank you.
Thank you for the invite. There will be a lot of overlap and crossover between the talks. As Dr. Valia mentioned, the BOA and BAPRAS guidelines should form a guidance for the IOA or TOSA to come up with their own guidelines. And I'll take you through the relevant part of a 108-page document in Drogheda, and that's a viaduct, which should actually remind us of the X fixes that we do. There's a lot of physics you can take up from bridges and scaffolds that you see wherever you visit. Now, this is one of my case where a patient came in with a intra-articular fracture of the distal femur with a bit of osteochondral fragment coming out through the wound. And in the middle of the night, I had to go and do an X-fix, a transarticular X-fix, and put a VAC dressing on it, and held that with a K-wire that was available to me. I didn't use any screw fixation yet. After 3 days, I went back, did a plating on both columns, antibiotic beads that are absorbable, and with a VAC dressing. That's an X-ray at 6 months' time, and that's the wound in 6 months' time. So the British Orthopedic Association and the Plastic Surgery Association have come up with this document. It's available online, and it's a very valuable document for you to go through and pick up what is relevant to you. They come up with a few topics. The important one of them is what needs to be referred. Not everybody can treat each and every case. So they say a transverse short oblique or a butterfly fragment of a tibial fracture, segmental fractures, or fractures where there is bone loss or extrusion needs to be referred to a specialist center. Okay. And the soft tissue injury patterns, they've defined a few soft tissue injury patterns where if you're not able to close the wound, if there's a degloving injury, or there is muscle injury which needs excision of the muscle, or if there is a vascular injury. So they want these cases to be referred to a specialist center where you have plastic and microvascular surgeon along with trauma and orthopedic surgeon. Now they advise that these have to be done during a normal working day, and you should also have microbiology and infectious disease consultants, experts support you. They also say that a specialist center should have a rehab center where you they can achieve at least 30 cases per annum. That's the minimum to have good outcomes. And you should also have multidisciplinary ward rounds and enough rehab to take place during their inpatient care. The initial management in ED, I think that's been discussed, and this is simple. The most important thing is it should not be provisionally cleaned, and you should get your antibiotic and tetanus prophylaxis along with limb splintage, and you should make sure you get 2 orthogonal X-rays. This has been discussed before. The important thing is to use antibiotics within 3 hours of injury. The preferred choice of antibiotics is Augmentin or cefuroxime 3 times a day until the first debridement. You have to do it with the soapy solution. Just give it a scrub, have a tourniquet. You can debride the soft tissue excision with tourniquet control. And then you can extend the wound above and below so that you can inspect the deeper structures. You have to go from center to periphery or periphery to center, be systematic. You then classify the wound as per the Gustello's after the debridement. Do you have a definitive construction plan, or do you want to use antibiotic beads or use a vac dressing? The bone debridement, again controversial. Dr. Tanga was yesterday showing how the bone can be put back. But the important thing is after you extend the traumatic wound, you need to deflate the tourniquet before you do the bone debridement. You want to see if the bone bleeds. If the bone doesn't bleed and you do the tug test, it's completely free, there's an argument to remove it rather than keep it in. Again, it depends on each and every case. You remove all your particulate foreign material. Going through if you find major articular fragments, please save them. It's very difficult to get osteochondral chunks unless you have a bone bank with allografts available. And you do a lavage once the wound is clean, and you have to make sure you do a bone zone by zone debridement. And they also have guidelines for stabilization of the skeleton. They have recommendations for soft tissue reconstruction. Just skipping through them. There is also recommendations about compartment syndrome and vascular injuries. It may not be all relevant for Indian scenario, but definitely they have taken about 3 years of trawling through the literature to come up with this, and this is set as best practice. If you do not follow these and something happens, then you will be liable in audits and mortality and morbidity meetings. I think the IOA and TOSA should pick up the right parts of this and have their own recommendations and guidelines. Thank you.
Respected chairpersons, I would like to thank the delegates. I would like to thank the organizers for giving me this opportunity and the audience for coming and sitting. Thank you. It's very depressing to talk to an empty hall. There's more than one way to skin a cat, and you will see that all 3 lectures will show the own take of the speakers on how to manage open fractures. So we all know what to do about open fractures. What is the standard of care? That's the important thing. So the roadmap here is we'll talk about the first look, antibiotics and all those things, what we do and what the literature says. The orthoplastic centers, where we have plastic surgeons and orthopedic surgeons working together, that's the best scenario that we can have. But that's really not possible in our setup, and we should try to get what's best. And this is what we'll see in the next few slides. When the patient comes to casualty, this is the scenario. I have blocked out the 20 different attendants who are there making noise. And for these are the people, first we have to do a documentation, get a clinical picture, x-rays, then go on to resuscitation and analgesia. We'll talk about all these things. And the severity of the injury also has to be gauged, and now immobilize and shift the patient. There's no role for debridement or doing any attempt to clean up the wound in the casualty. Many scores are there, but I'm proud to say that the Indian Ganga trauma score is acknowledged by a lot of Europeans that it takes care of the deficits in the Gustlow-Anderson and the MES scores and other systems. So I think we should all follow it more frequently. And another issue is, why do we commonly have these patient-doctor conflicts? Because in the rush or in the tension to get the patient into the OR, we forget to classify the wounds. We think we are senior, but these 3B and 3C fractures need a lot of logical observation and see the various factors before we can understand the fracture ourselves. And we have to explain the consequence of this fracture to the patient and the attendants. And I have to emphasize the importance of counseling, because first 6 people will come, then another 4 will come. We try to get impatient by the time, but thing is, there's no harm in counseling, because the more you counsel, the day the argument comes, a total stranger will be standing in front of you and asking questions. So it's better to counsel the patients as many times as possible. Cultures. Again, the first thing is you are rushing to get a swab and do it. The literature shows that only 8% of the cultured organisms are found in the wound at the end of the day. And all the studies have shown that pre- and post-debridement cultures have absolutely no value. And once you take the patient into hospital, our nosocomial organisms are the predominant organisms in the wounds. And like we have talked, which antibiotic? Everybody has shown their, this thing. The Indian study, I will go to that a little bit. Usually I use cephalosporins, amikacin, and also probably in an agricultural wound, I would like to go for metronidazole. BOA guidelines have been mentioned by Murli. And I think Messner has again given a big study. We'll come to that. So this is a very busy slide. This was in 2017. I think the gist of that is antibiotic for more than 72 hours, the infection rate is 20%. When it is less than 72 hours, it is 17%. I was surprised. It's a huge meta-analysis of about 7,000 patients. So it can't be totally wrong. We have to follow this. And in comparison, I picked up an Indian series, which has only 64 patients. But here, the infection rates in 3B have been between 10 and 50%, and in 3C, they have been about 25 to 50%, which are very high infection rates compared to the Western series. So why do we have these high infection rates? One, is it, that's just a question. This doesn't have any scientific basis here. Is it our tropical climate? Do the bacteria grow much faster in the tropics? Then do the patients present late? It does happen many times. And our patients, the extremities are exposed a lot of times. If you see the open fractures in Western countries, most of them are because of biking accidents and in industrial accidents where the people are well clothed and the bones don't come into contact with the external environment. Whereas in India, the agricultural accidents are much more, and you see dust, grain, grass, whatnot in the wounds. And the other thing is our approach to open fractures a little laid back? And do we abuse our antibiotics? So all these things may be responsible for what is happening in our scenario. This is a slide from 2012. Please pardon me for this picture. At that time, I was younger and I was putting pictures like this. Now I don't do it anymore. So then what happened was, the craze of the day or the flavor of the season was pulsatile lavage. So people were telling use 4 to 15 psi. There were guidelines for that. They said that fluid dynamic force, bacterial loads less than 100,000 is good for healing and all that. But now we have a study from Bhandari, the king of meta-analysis. He studied 2,500 odd patients, and he said he did a study called the flow study. Then he came out and said there's no role for pulsatile lavage. So you throw out all your Pulsavacs. Use them only for arthroplasty. Then he again said that if you use a higher pressure, the reoperation rate for these patients is 13%, which is pretty high. And he said gravity flow, 1 to 2 psf is enough to debride the wounds. So things keep on changing. The same person who stood on a stage like this and said, oh, you have to use pulsatile lavage, today I'm saying don't use pulsatile lavage. So that is the nature of scientific this thing. And as seniors, we all hate debridement. Thing is, so in casualty, only remove the contaminants like external waste. Don't try to do anything to tissues. Then the other thing is, an open wound, contrary to regular expectations, is not a dirty wound. It is open. It may look terrible, but it's not dirty. It can go into the main OT. Don't take it into the third room where you did a diabetic foot. So what you need is a main OT, main surgeon, good lighting and all. That gives you the best result, because the first step, there was an adage said by one of the plastic surgeons. He said, fail to plan means you plan to fail. So that's what you have to think about. And the essence of debridement is take out all the non-viable tissue. It's like a surgical strike. So everybody is talking about surgical strike, even we can do that. Then timing of debridement, Shankar et al., he said, again a meta-analysis which said that there is no difference in the rate of infection in delayed debridement. Every day we say you have to do it in the middle of the night. No. Wait till morning. Give the timing of the antibiotic administration has a major role in the outcome of the fracture. So that, like we said, up to 24 hours is the time when you give a proper antibiotic cover. And the 6-hour rule has really gone for a 6. You don't have to follow that anymore. So the fix and flap ideology. So that has come up in a big way. That means they say if you can reconstruct or stabilize the bone and reconstruct the soft tissue envelope within 72 hours, the results are much more. You have to do a temporary bone stabilization. Do we do a bead pouch? And when we do the definitive fixation. So external fixators are the mainstay in these open fractures. Pick one that you are familiar with. Don't jump from one model to other so that you can do a better job. And remember that they are not the definitive treatment many a time. And when you're talking about open fractures, leave room for others to work. Like, for example, your plastic surgeon is going to come in. Don't put so many pins that this fellow can't do anything. What's the point of calling a plastic surgeon if your limb is looking like a porcupine with a lot of pins and needles? He has to put a flap. He has to manage the soft tissues. So this is what you have to keep in mind. My favorite fixator is the AVO type, that is the uniplanar Z frame, or I call it the postgraduate frame, because even in the middle of the night, a postgraduate can do this. And even if the alignment is not good, you can correct the alignment once the patient comes to the ward. Anytime, anywhere, alignment can be changed. So this is, and the antibiotic bead pouches, what can you do? We have a 52-year-old patient with a farm injury. We did a gravity lavage. At that time, we were doing a pulsavac, and we did a medullary canal washout by sending in a catheter. We did an extensile incision. And how do these antibiotic bead pouches work? Because running short of time. So we usually take the gentamicin cement, I add vancomycin to it, 3 grams for every 40 grams, and that gives a high concentration of your local antibiotic, prevents your glycocalyx formation. And the antibiotic elutes for up to 6 weeks, because in a proper scenario, you don't need 6 weeks. You're going to finish your definitive treatment in about 2 weeks. So this is what it is. I say, when in doubt, drop a pouch. Put a bead pouch inside. So this is the picture once you did a X-fix and put in the pouch. So later at 2 weeks, we exchange it for nail. That is the healed picture of this patient. I think a few more slides. That is the post-op follow-up. And the question in our minds is, are these beads really working? So some of the removed beads we sent for culture and sensitivity, and you see the way the colonies don't grow around the beads. They have a huge zone of inhibition compared to a standard testing disc, which has a very narrow zone. They do work. And negative pressure therapy is a transient cover in these patients. It can be used for wound stabilization and as a barrier to infection. And if you want to go in for a second look infection, you are very comfortable with that. And you want to assess the zone of injury also. So this is after first removal of the first NPWT, the wound looks healthy, and then you can make the subsequent plans. So how long are we going to leave the external fixator? Most of the studies say 2 to 3 weeks is the optimal time, and depending on that, whether you want to plate it or nail it, depending on how the fracture is. So after X weeks, if you have a clean wound, you can put a nail or a plate, but I'm more partial to nails because plates, again, you are devitalizing a lot of tissues. If there's a minimal bone loss, you can go for a nail with a bone graft. If there's a segmental loss, you can go for a plate or a nail and try a masculine technique in addition. So this is the various choice of implant, but if you're going to continue with an external fixator, one thing I would say is your frame will never go into help union. You have to go for a third generation, either a ring fixator or a fourth generation LRS kind of thing, or a spatial frame to get union. You won't get your union with a uniplanar fixator. So don't leave it on for a long time. So choosing your flaps, you avoid the zone of injury. When in doubt, put a VAC dressing and wait. And because a flap failure, if it happens, it's going to make a bad situation worse. So why do we need to reconstruct the soft tissue envelope? Because you want to contain the fracture hematoma, you want to start the cytokines and the signaling pathways for the bone union, and you want to prevent infection and restore the physiology. So these are the various flaps. I won't go into it. The only thing is, we always talk about reconstructive ladder. Nowadays, that's no longer correct. What you want to do is a reconstructive lift. That is, you go directly to the more optimal or a more complicated flap if you can do it. If you can do a fasciocutaneous flap, don't think about a free flap, or don't think about a split skin graft. Or if you can do a free flap, don't go for all these things, do it. Go to the best method because the results are much better with that. And one concept or misconception I want to do is most of the flaps can take an external fixator pin through that. So what you do is the sequence is first fix the bone with a fixator, you know where the Schanz pin is going, then cover it with a flap. You use a gastrocnemius flap here, and gently pass a pin through the flap and put on your clamp. So nothing will happen through the flap, whether it's a muzzle flap or a fasciocutaneous flap, nothing will happen to it. So the soleus flap for mid-third defects. And the other thing is, you see large wounds like this was a clean wound which had an intramedullary nail, and it looks very big, but thing is, don't get disheartened when you see a big wound because only a full thickness flap is required for only the bone. All the muscle and fascia will take a split skin gap. So what we do is a non-homogeneous cover, and this is the thing, this patient, only the bone we covered with the fasciocutaneous flap, both the proximal and distally we covered a split skin graft that went on to good healing. So the free flap dilemma is, I undoubtedly is the best option, but the thing is, it can go where no other flap can go, but the thing is, do you have the infrastructure to do it? And you always need a team, and the costs are also an issue. So, but if you can do a free flap, don't think twice about it, go ahead and do it. And timing and outcomes. So definitive fixation of these fractures can be done if it's a clean wound up to 13 hours. So don't think that the time has golden time and 6 hours has passed and don't start doing it. And at the end of the day, I mean, there's no take-home slide because all these slides for various aspects of which have been take-home slides. So each open fracture is a different beast. You think you know everything, suddenly it will throw a surprise at you. Follow an algorithm so that you will get more predictable result. And at all times, I would say, communicate with the patient what is happening. And still, the occasional one will get away from you. You will still have bad results. And if you follow these guidelines, you can still say, I did everything, I had a failure. So thank you very much.
Thank you, sir.
Flap cover in grade 3B and 3C, fractures of the tibia. This is the Gustulus Anderson. This was discussed extensively already. So the severity of open fractures depends on the size and number of fragments, damage to surrounding tissues, that is how much the soft tissues got injured around it and the vascular structures, and also the location of the wound, whether the wound around is vascular or avascular. So extensive discussion was done already for debridement and irrigation and fixations. Internal fixations may be done for small injuries, small open wounds, or wounds with less contamination. But our preference is an external fixator, whether it is a AO external fixator or Ilizaro. Normally we put a half rings for the Ilizaro as primary fixations. And once the flap cover settles, then we convert it into complete rings. So this is the reconstructive ladder. So I am concerned with the flap covers as a plastic surgeon. To discuss a random flap you can see random flap, it doesn't contain any named vessel in it. It is only a random. It is based on subdermal and subdermal plexus of vessels. So you can see the deep fascia is not included in a random flap. Only 1:1 dimension, that is length breadth ratio, can be taken in a random flap. With little knowledge of anatomy and planning, this can be managed. The random flap or a fasciocutaneous flap can be managed by the orthopedic surgeon himself. Whereas in fasciocutaneous flap, we include deep fascia so that the supra and the infra deep facial plexus will be supplying the flap, so that the length breadth ratio can be increased, maybe 1:2. Whereas in the axial pattern flap, you can see an artery running along the length of the flap. So the length breadth ratio can be increased up to even 1:3 or 1:4. Whereas in a musculocutaneous flap, we take the muscle along with the overlying skin. We prefer muscle because muscle has the osteogenic potential, and it also brings good blood supply into the injured site, so that the rate of infection is less. Again, this is a random flap. You can see no particular vessel goes into the vessel. Whereas in axial pattern flap, you can see an artery running along the length of the flap. Whereas in free flap, this is the flap with its arterial supply. I have not shown the vein supply. So the flap with the artery and vein are cut off from the donor side. They are lifted and they are transferred to the recipient side, and we find a suitable vessel at the recipient side and do the anastomosis. Whereas the now present concept is more for the perforator flaps. They are very simple flaps. With a Doppler, if you can Doppler and identify a good perforator, maybe on the posterior tibial or any from the peroneal perforators, you can put a small flap into the defects. So the zone of injuries are for discussion sake may be divided into 5 zones, but for convenience sake we can discuss it in zone 3, that is upper 1/3, middle 1/3 and lower 1/3. For the upper 1/3, the workhorse will be the gastrocnemius. We will be mostly using the medial heads for the medial flex, and we can also use the lateral heads. We can use both the heads on either side for convenience. For middle 1/3, it will be the soleus muscle flap. The free flaps are preferred for the lower 1/3 flaps, or whenever a flap crosses 2 or 3 zones, or where very big tissue reconstruction is required. This is an example of local flap. The donor defect is skin grafted. Another case. This is a delayed case we have got. This is in the upper middle 1/3 defect. You can see the fracture here, but poorly planned incisions was already given on either side, and there was also an arterial injury with less blood supply to the distal limb. So we had no options except to do a cross leg flap, which was the workhorse in the olden days. You can see a flap harvested from the opposite limb. This is an inferiorly based perforator-based posterior cutaneous perforator-based flap. This is transferred to the opposite leg. You can see a fixator for the injured limb. We also put some fixator to the donor area. You can see your donor leg, and put crossbars for joining both the fixators. You can see the flap being transferred to the opposite leg, and this is the pedicle. Once the flap settles down, the pedicle is divided and the legs are separated. You can see how nicely this has settled. This is the donor, right? Middle one-third fractures. You can see the soleus. We normally take medial half of the soleus because if you take whole soleus, the rotation will be difficult. So this is the medial half of soleus. We ligate the perforators from the posterior tibial artery and then we leave one or two perforators in the upper end. The soleus is transferred into the defect and well settled flap. Again, another soleus flap. This is the reverse solar artery flap, already discussed. This is the islanded flap, and it contains the soral nerve along with its accompanying artery. So, for lower one-third fractures, now the reverse solar artery flap is doing very good work and avoiding free flaps for small defects. This is the defect on the medial side of the leg with fracture, and this is the reverse solar artery flap. Another reverse solar artery flap. Free flaps. Free flaps are used when only the free flaps is the option. Then where the defect is more complicated, we use free flaps. And you can see free flaps also are used when the defect process more than one zone. But the disadvantages, as you all know, it needs training, large equipments, and long operating times. But nowadays we are doing almost in 6 to 7 hours we are completing a free flap. And the longer duration of time, the more medical complications. This is an anterolateral type. Now the workhorse now for the plastic surgeon, because the whole surgery can be completed and epidural anesthesia. This is the opposite. From we harvest this anterolateral thigh flap, which is based on descending branch of lateral circumflex femoral artery. We cut the artery here along with the perforator supplying the overlying skin. This is the skin paddle. These are the perforators, maybe coming through the subcutaneous or musculocutaneous through the vastus lateralis muscle. And this is the descending branch of lateral circumflex femoral artery. These are perforators are marked beforehand with a handheld Doppler. Especially grade 3 C injury, where there is an arterial injury, for repair, either that arterial injury can be repaired with a vein graft, or this is what is called a flow-through flap. This is an anterolateral flap. This is the descending branch of lateral circumflex artery. So the proximal artery will be anastomosed to the distal part of the injured artery, and this will be a flow-through to the opposite side, to the distal part. So this is the this will be useful as an arterial graft, and then the perforator from this one will be feeding the overlying skin, which can be used for the cover. This is the perforator, this is the proximal end, this is the distal end. Some high-grade velocity injuries covering, these requires free flap. So anterolateral thigh flap, you can see the perforators here. And the anastomosis is done to the antitibial vessels. Final result. Another case of anterolateral thigh flap. You can see the arterial injury here. I repaired with a graft and then these are all anterolateral thigh flaps. This is the muscle flap, latissimus dorsi, but the problem is that we need to give general anesthesia for these cases. So the latissimus dorsi flap depending on the thoracodorsal vessels. As I told you, muscle will bring lot of blood supply to the wound area. So the healing will be good. This is an example of latissimus dorsi. Very complex injuries, large defects can be covered with latissimus dorsi. Here we are constructed with the soral nerve grafts for the posterior tibial nerve. Very complex injuries when large defects can be covered with the. This is the anterolateral thigh flap again. Thank you.